We've all made mistakes at work here and there, but some people genuinely take it to a whole other level. From signing gibberish to lying about being sick, here are 15 people who had their first and last day at work. Number 1. Woman who signed gibberish. In 2017, a woman named Darylyn Roberts took a job as an interpreter during a Florida news conference. As Tampa Police Chief Brian Dugan announced the arrest of Howell Donaldson, Roberts was there beside him making signs that made no sense. Rachel Settembrino, an ASL teacher at the University of South Florida, said that Roberts sat up there and waved her arms like she was singing Jingle Bells. Amongst the things that Roberts signed, according to Settembrino, was the following: 51 hours ago, 01222, murder, 3 minutes and 14 weeks ago, in old, murder, 45, 55,000, plea 10, arrest, murder, Bush, 3, age 24. Tampa Police Department spokesman Steve Haggerty said that Roberts just showed up and told him that she was there to provide the sign language interpretation at their November 28th news conference. He assumed that someone else at the department had called for the service that it uses for interpreters. Roberts would be questioned by the police for her actions, although there is no news on whether or not she spent any time behind bars. The Daily Mail also revealed that police records showed that she had previous convictions for grand theft and burglary. She had even served a 5-year sentence on a felony fraud conviction before being released in 2016. Talk about lying on the resume but still getting the job. Number 2. BBC News reporter accidentally inhales drugs. In 2010, Quentin Somerville, a BBC reporter, was on the job in the Middle East when he was reporting on a massive pile of drugs being burned by authorities when he got high inhaling the fumes. After accidentally inhaling the fumes, a single sentence was all Somerville could get through before bursting into some serious giggles. He tried several more times to get through the taped segment, but could not produce anything but laughs. According to the Telegraph, Somerville sent out the blooper reel to his followers, noting that, after a year of bullets and bloodshed, he offered the video as a Christmas laugh at my expense. BBC, in a statement, wanted to make it very clear that the 4-year-old footage never made it onto the air, and I guess that we can all see why. Number 3. Money spills on freeway. An armored truck spilled a huge wad of cash across a California freeway, prompting chaotic scenes as drivers stopped to scoop up banknotes. One of the doors popped open and some bags of cash fell out, California Highway Patrol Officer Curtis Martin would tell a local news outlet. Some of the bags broke apart in the lanes, and there was cash all across the lanes. Demi Bagby, a social media personality and athlete with over 2 million followers, even posted a video of herself at the scene, showing the cash strewn about on the ground. Videos posted to social media would show people who were dashing around on the roadway, scooping up money, and even throwing handfuls of cash into the air in celebration. Reporter Melissa Adden, who was at the scene, tweeted photos of the aftermath, saying that all that was left on the scene were money bands from the armored truck. Several folks were seen pulling over to search for money, she would write in the tweet, and CHP reminds us that you can still be arrested for taking this money and urges anyone who did pick money up to return it. It is safe to say that whoever was behind the wheel that day probably had their last day at work. Number 4. Paramedics announcement fail. Now, if you didn't know that July 8th is International Paramedics Day, you'd never forget it after watching this hilarious announcement. 2022 is the first year this day is being used to recognize and celebrate the hardworking paramedics of the world, and to raise awareness, 2 paramedics at the East of England Ambulance Service made a video for social media, which would prove to be much more challenging than they imagined. Every time that Dave Tamero tried starting the video with "Hello everybody, welcome," his colleague Joe Cartwright began to laugh.
Hello everybody, welcome to...
In a Facebook video the ambulance service shared, it seems that it took them many tries to get past that part. After moving to a new location, Dave and Joe could finally get past their introduction, but not by much. Their next hurdle was getting Joe to answer the question, "What's it like being a paramedic?" with something other than "it's good." Despite their difficulties finishing the video, their efforts certainly did not go to waste. They used all of the hilarious footage to raise awareness for International Paramedics Day although certainly not in the way that they had planned. Number 5. Bank intern caught lying. If you're calling out of work to attend a party, the least that you can do is not post the pictures online. Unfortunately, this bank intern would learn the lesson the hard way. An intern at Anglo-Irish Bank, Kevin Colvin, emailed his boss, Paul Davis, saying that he had to return to New York City because something had come up. His boss granted his request, but it turns out that something was a Halloween party in Worcester, Massachusetts. One of the intern's co-workers found this freshly posted picture on his Facebook page, an image of Colvin dressed up as a green fairy, a wand in one hand, and a Bud Light in the other. You can already guess what happened next. That co-worker snitched on him, and unfortunately Colvin's boss got word of his lie. Kevin's boss then responded to the following email the next day, even CCing in the rest of the employees as he fired Colvin shortly after. Yikes! Number 6. Refrigerator delivery fail. 2 men would be delivering a refrigerator to a home when everything that could have gone wrong did. The incident, caught on the home's CCTV, captures the 2 men lifting the fridge up the stairs, and as they approach the top of the stairs, the man at the bottom misses a step, causing the refrigerator to come tumbling down and losing one side of the door. Given the weight imbalance, it seemed inevitable. And now, I'm no expert, but it seems to me that the guy at the bottom had to put in twice as much effort as the one at the top, and on top of that, the fridge was not on a dolly. Perhaps the delivery guys could have avoided this incident if the refrigerator had been tilted toward the stairs and had been appropriately strapped. Fortunately, no one would be hurt, but this incident will definitely be tricky to explain to the customer. Number 7. Woman caught at soccer match. Dina Faruqi was a digital content coordinator whose friend was able to score tickets to the Euro 2020 semi-final soccer game. Thinking that it was unlikely she would be granted the day off to attend, she called in sick to work so that she could go and watch the match. After arriving at Wembley Stadium for the game, she and her friend realized that they had great seats. The seats were in a perfect spot to see the action, but this also meant that they were in a direct shot of cameras capturing the game. Faruqi was initially worried about being seen, but said that she figured she wouldn't be seen in the crowd of 66,000 people. She thought that she might have gotten away with calling in sick, but later found out that she and her friend had been captured on television celebrating. It was not long before her bosses would see it as well, and they called her less than 12 hours later, telling her not to come back to work as she had breached her employment contract by lying. If there's one thing not to do when you manage to get out of work, this would be it. Perhaps Faruqi might have had better luck if she didn't have such superb seats at the game. Number 8. Car delivery gone wrong. This video serves as a reminder of why you should only sign for a vehicle once the keys are in your hand and you've thoroughly inspected every inch of it. One unfortunate customer in the Netherlands captured the delivery of his new Audi A3 on video, but disaster would strike as the delivery driver who was unloading it off the truck attempted to pull into the driveway. The delivery was going smoothly initially, with the truck driver backing the A3 off of the flatbed, and then there was a loud bang as the car rolled off the ramps, giving the impression that the front end had scraped, though it is unclear whether it did or if it was just the ramps banging the road. As the driver pulls into the driveway, a motorcyclist speeds down the sidewalk, crashing directly into the A3. You can even see the motorcyclist's head bounce off the trunk and his helmet fly off. Thankfully, the rider got up, showed no apparent injuries, and could still pick up the motorcycle, and hilariously, this happened as the Audi's owner watched from their window. A few things definitely went wrong here. The rider was speeding on the sidewalk, making the crash his fault. And even if you argue that the delivery driver should have checked to see if anyone was coming from the right, it's hard to anticipate a speeding motorcycle and braking on time. You could also argue that the delivery truck was blocking the bike lane, which it was, and that's what forced the rider onto the sidewalk. But there's nowhere else for the truck to go, and in that situation, the rider would have been better off using the street instead of the sidewalk. The second issue is the helmet. It did not seem to be strapped onto the rider's head, as it quickly flew off during the crash. Now, I'm no safety engineer, but surely helmets have to stay on your head to be effective. Thankfully, no one seemed to be seriously injured, and the Audi customer, who was just a bystander in the incident, will likely have the dealership handle the issue. Since the customer probably never officially signed for the car, the dealership will likely have to rectify the problem. But still, it's remarkable how many things went wrong during this bizarre car delivery, and I bet the delivery driver has had a lot of explaining to do to his boss. Number 9. News reporting fail. We all know what it's like to zone out at work sometimes, but did you ever think a few seconds of daydreaming would get you fired? Well, surely Australian news reporter Natasha Exelby didn't either, until it happened to her. When a pre-recorded segment ended, the camera cut back quickly to Exelby. She stared at her pen for several seconds before gasping, jumping in surprise, and before quickly transitioning into sports coverage after getting caught not paying attention. Exelby managed to recover from the blooper, responding promptly and anchoring the coverage until midnight. She took the incident in good humor, even writing on Twitter to thank everyone for their support, and her network, however, did not agree. News Corp would report that Exelby was banned from future on-air roles following the incident. Because the video went viral, News Corp received some backlash. Dozens of journalists and even politicians took to social media to defend her. After all, there were other solutions they could have taken instead of letting her go. Thankfully, Exelby scored a new gig with Sydney's Kiss 106.5, who even praised her for handling the attention and public scrutiny. Number 10. Kids barge in on dad's interview. After having just undergone a pandemic, we all know the struggles of working at home when other family members are around. Although Professor Robert Kelly probably experienced it first in a video that went viral 4 years ago, labeling him BBC Dad. The video, which begins with Kelly offering his thoughts about the impeachment of a politician, takes a turn when his daughter begins dancing her way into the room. In an instant, the little pigtailed girl became the center of attention. Kelly then reaches behind to keep his daughter back away from the camera when a few seconds later, Kelly's toddler son joins in on the act, bursting into the room in a rolling walker and heading straight towards the camera. Kelly apologizes and tries to keep his composure when his wife darts into the room to retrieve the children. He then goes over recent events on the Korean Peninsula, with the entire scene unfolding behind him. He managed to complete the interview, but it probably was the longest 40 seconds of their father's life. If you've ever had something embarrassing happen to you in an interview, you know that you're not alone. Number 11. News anchor loses it. In 2018, a man robbed a local market in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and according to witnesses, he took money from an unattended cash register while he pretended to be a customer. The man managed to escape before the store owner could notify the police. However, a witness was able to describe the man, and from that, a sketch artist made a portrait. Ethan Forhetz, a news anchor responsible for delivering the news on the KY3 station, was just as mind-blown as everyone else upon seeing the image of the sketch. He paused briefly before staring back at the camera and describing the drawing. It's clear at this point that Forhetz was already trying to hold back his laughter, but he continued on to maintain his composure. Forhetz then received news mid-air that the police had caught the suspect, and when KY3 placed a side-by-side comparison of the suspect's actual photo and the sketch together, that's when Forhetz lost it all. I'm not sure what's more surprising, that the drawing was enough for people to identify the man and find the suspect, or that Forhetz managed to maintain somewhat professional control. I certainly could not have done it myself. Number 12. Squirrel interrupts Zoom call. In this hilarious viral TikTok video, a man goes wild when a squirrel enters his home office while he's on a Zoom call. Let's just take a second to unpack everything that's going on in the video. It seems that it's not this man's first encounter with the squirrel. He already has a baseball bat leaning against the wall beside his desk. Secondly, once the man notices the squirrel has entered the room, he screams for someone, saying that the squirrel is back. Clearly, the squirrel had been inside the house earlier, but they were not able to locate it. It appears that the man returned to work before the squirrel struck once again, leaving us with this hilarious video. He grabs the baseball bat and begins screaming, eventually jumping on his desk, and then the squirrel seems to lunge at him, causing him to yell even more. To be honest, I'm not really sure who's more scared of him at this point, the squirrel or whoever's at the other end of the Zoom call. The clip is not the only footage that documents this man and the squirrel. There's even an updated clip titled "The Squirrel is Back." The man's wife had been chronicling these incidents for our amusement, even working on the follow-up conversation with his coworkers. At this point, it seems a little bit personal, so stay tuned for their profile for more updates. Number 13. Wall of wine collapses. If you've ever thought about quitting before being fired, you know that you're not alone. A CCTV camera at a restaurant in St. Petersburg, Russia, would capture the startling moment when a man pulled out one of the scores of bottles from a suspended floor-to-ceiling wine rack. He checks the label before putting the bottle back. However, the worker nudges the bottle above, and the ropes supporting the bottles begin to wobble, sending some cascading onto the floor. Initially, he seems to steady the bottles and stop any more from falling, but when a colleague comes to help him hold them back, there appears to be a chain reaction. And within seconds, all the remaining bottles smash to the ground. The cost of damage is unknown, but it seemed to be estimated to be around 1 million rubles, which is approximately 14,000 US dollars. Initial reports would suggest that the wine wall was already prone to collapse due to unspecified miscalculations by the wine room manufacturers. I'm not sure if the restaurant worker is even at fault here to begin with, and it's not such a bright idea to put hundreds of bottles of wine on a suspended wine rack. It seems like whoever has to clean all of that up will be working overtime. Number 14. Electrician, not the brightest spark. Part of an electrician's job is to plan installations properly, troubleshoot electrical problems, and install electrical systems. This electrician, however, finds out the hard way that maybe he would have to consider a different profession. The electrician wearing the striped t-shirt had his whole head in the hole where he was due to fit lights in. His back would be facing his coworker when he realized that although he had managed to get his head in, he could not angle it to free it out. He pauses for a few seconds while thinking of a way to get out of the hole, and instead of helping, his coworker secretly films the struggle, trying to hold back their laughter and joking as he watches his colleague struggle to free himself. His colleague simply cannot contain his laughter when he finally faces the coworker with the top of his head in the hole. Number 15. Google Hangout mishap. If there's anything that should remind you to double-check your audio and video during an online meeting, this may be it. Radio hosts for Portland's country station 98.7 The Bull were concluding a typical Google Hangout call when one of the attendees made a viral mistake. Tony Russell, Mojo Roberts, Danny Dwyer, and Jen Hayes were all signing off on their call when Russell got up from his desk, seemingly assuming another coworker would end the video conference. Instead, though, Roberts, Dwyer, and Hayes widened their eyes and laughed as they witnessed Russell's post-meeting routine of wandering around his apartment and stretching in his underwear, even getting a few butt scratches in. They try to remedy the situation, calling out to Russell, who doesn't hear them. Roberts can barely finish his words as he continues laughing at his barely dressed coworker. Hayes gets a hold of Russell on his cell phone, and when he picks up, he tells him that she can see his underwear. Russell turns to look back at his computer and finally sees that his 3 coworkers are still on the call watching him. He then sprints out of the camera's view. 98.7 The Bull's YouTube channel only has around 50,000 subscribers, but the mishap video racked up over 5 million views. It's clear that Russell sees the humor in the situation, as he even uploaded the viral video himself to his Facebook profile. I hope that you had a good laugh at some of these workers' mishaps. Let us know if you've ever had anything like this happen to you, and if you had to face any consequences in the comments down below.